So you guys can start whenever you're ready.
Alrighty.
And when you're not actually using the slides, then bring the Zoom window back forward.
Okay.
Then you can see the
I'll just do it whenever we do introductions.
I already forgot what the name is. AABR. Speak. Speak space. Speak. Speak. I don't know. I know not 700%. Yeah, but we kind of costs.
All right, we're ready. We'll go ahead and start. So this morning we're going to do a panel on working effectively with system-facing professionals. And so I'll be moderating the panel. My name is David Aiken, and I work here at OU Supercomputing at Oscar, and been here for about 15 years. And I'm a systems analyst, and so I'm the one in charge of, as Henry puts it, wrangling the beast below our own clusters. So also on the panel is Mike here, if you want to do a little.
Mike Renfro, Tennessee Tech, mostly full-time HPC for 2 years, research and development engineer for 17 years prior. So I've been doing HPC for most of that time, but it only became a full-time gig in central IT a little less than 2 years ago.
And we also have David Chin. All right, David, you want to?
Hey, so I'm David Chin. I am a senior sysadmin at Drexel, running the HPC. I've been doing HPC as a job for the last 10 plus years. Before that, I ran my own cluster as a postdoc, and I've been doing research computing like pretty much since I was an undergrad.
Very good. All right, we also have Sean Dowdy. Sean, are you online?
Yes, I'm here. Sean Dowdy from Tufts University. And as always, I have my video turned off, so the audio is hopefully working and has enough bandwidth. I've been doing IT my entire life, except for a short stint as a incredibly awesome chef. And I've been doing research computing in the university setting for about 15 years, and for 5-6 years specifically with Tufts high performance compute cluster.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And last but not least, we have Scott Hampton.
Hi, I'm Scott, and I work for the Center for Research Computing at the University of Notre Dame. I've been here a little over 6 years, but research computing experience going back to graduate school, and I also did a postdoc at Oak Ridge many years ago.
Okay. What we want to talk about today is how to interface with system professionals. I know that sometimes we can be really kind of more ADD and real kind of precise, maybe a little introverted at times, but maybe we can give you some handling instructions about how to do a better job. So one of the things that we wanted to put up is some quick stats about each one of our institutions and the size of each. And one of the things that kind of struck me whenever we're putting the slide together is the number of sysadmin headcount for each one of the institutions. Now, it was kind of surprising to me that there was one institution that had a single sysadmin for their cluster, which that seems like whenever we started out, you know, Brandon was it. So, and he was spinning all plates, and which is when they end up hiring me, and we're up to 5 now. But that seems like a lot for a single person to be having to handle all of the user creation and installation of software, debugging systems, hardware replacements.
And I think these numbers aren't even I know my number is not the research sysadmin headcount. Now maybe David's is.
Okay.
That is our sysadmin headcount for the entire university.
Wow.
And I'm thinking maybe some of these others where yours obviously isn't.
Yeah, ours is just the ones that are dedicated.
So in my case, yeah, I'm a 1.
You're a 1. So how do you do that and still stay sane?
After I finished the PhD, it got a little easier.
Right.
But I mean, I do a lot of provisioning, but I don't have to do everything like I used to in the R&D engineer job. So I'm in the same domain, authentication domain, as the rest of the university. I don't make accounts. I add people to a group. You know.
So they're the ones that create the accounts. Do you do the software installs as well?
Typically, or I farm it out to the users.
Okay. We ended up doing that a lot. We used to have like power users and pointed them to the Kevin Thomases of the world and made him kind of take care of the application part of it a lot. Okay. And then you're a 1, right, Jerry? You don't have anybody working for you.
Right.
Okay. Did you ever have anybody?
Not here. When I was back in Texas, there was a group of 3 of us that approximated 1 FTE that handled about 300 users, 400 users, and do all the hardware.
Wow.
And we made it work somehow.
Okay. Luckily, we don't have to. Don't have that.
I'm sure about Sean and Scott's situation there.
Sean and Scott, do you guys is that some people that on your number, is that dedicated to
So we have a shared IT setup, and I'm part of central IT. Research computing is part of central IT. So I have 2 people working for me. They are on the user support side. And so the 4 is almost just a semi-random number that I tossed out there because we work with our networking group, our system administration group, our client support and desktop support group, as well as our storage group. And each of those teams has a small amount carved out of their time for research computing. Specifically, the system administration team has some time carved out, as well as storage. So out of the sysadmin team, we have probably 1 FTE in reality and a half FTE out of the storage team. And then the others just kind of accrue time when we can get time. So who knows? We're probably technically much lower than 4.
Wow. So you don't have time to do like profiling of any user applications or anything like that? I mean, with that low of a head count.
Yeah, no, the sysadmin team just keeps things running. The user-facing team deals with obviously user-facing stuff. Right. And certainly some things have fallen out by the wayside over the years, in particular profiling, yes.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So I'll let you.
I think these are Sean's slides. You want to be blamed for.
I can certainly go through them really quick, and of course, blame me for any of the content, not anyone else or my university. So I've basically subtitled this: "Treat system staff like your users treat you." Be sure to scope out the problem, provide as little information as humanly possible, put little to no effort up front. My users are really good. If they hear back from this, they're going to kill me for this. Be as terse and efficient as possible. Don't overwhelm the sysadmin staff with too much information. When replying to specific lists of questions from the sysadmin staff, ensure that you skip items, reply out of order, and actually don't answer the question.
Yeah, I always love that part. Make it so you have to tease out even the best of answer. Okay.
So I'll go through these, and then hopefully we'll have some good discussion at the end. Time constraints. There are none. There's staff. They're sitting around waiting to help you. They're doing nothing else. Be timely with your requests to sysadmin staff. Be quick to demand, but take weeks or months to reply when they have questions. Be aware of your deadlines. Always ask for assistance from the sysadmin staff as you get near, past the deadline. It's a good motivator for them. It's perhaps a good motivator for you as well. You're in the driver's seat. If you have issues with sysadmin staff, be sure and wave your hands in exasperation, hoping it will all magically go away and magically work. Build people up. Build your service up. Be sure to reward failure and communicate failure and challenges to basically everyone who will listen.
Yeah.
Offer to help staff if there's a roadblock by calling someone higher up, or suggest that you help them do some of the work, because it's not really all that difficult, you know.
Now, you don't have any users that are on here, do you?
I probably can't breathe right now thinking of this from the user perspective. Truthfully, if sysadmin staff and the users see this, I hope it actually creates a conversation. Because, of course, while I probably went through that list way too quickly, we know, of course, don't do any of that, except under extreme circumstances. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So the conversation, whether you're user-facing or system-facing, is, you know, what should we do? And that, you know, hopefully just provided a few minutes of levity so we can get beyond our normal human traits of doing exactly what I just listed, or users doing that, and come up with some possible discussions and solutions.
Okay.
And by the way, I was, and in many ways, I'm still a sysadmin, so I don't know if that gets me off the hook any.
Now, I think you were the one that had that. Which one of us on the panel had a situation where you didn't have anybody working directly for you? All the systems facing were all from IT.
So Tufts is that way as well, even though we are in the same, quote, overall IT organization. The system staff don't work directly for me, but I think there's someone else here where they're part of an entirely different group.
David, I think, is the external to IT.
Is that right?
If that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, it seemed like there was someone on here that had where it was like a totally separate organization. They were running a cluster kind of by themselves. So they were the ones interfacing with the users, and they would pull in system administrators as they needed them, which I thought was really,
Not me.
yeah. Does anybody else have that here where you don't have your own system administrators or systems that you do? Tell me about that.
Well, this just actually happened. We had a reorganization in my office, and we had a systems administrator who was assigned to us, and he then moved away from us now to be part of a group of systems administrators who help folks in our organization.
Right.
But he's the only one who has HPC experience. I'm still trying to work out with my management, you know, how he's going to be able to help me to administrate the system. While at the same time, he's also supposed to be helping this other group of administrators learn how to administrate the HPC system, which I think our management really understands is probably gonna take.
It's a years-long learning curve to do that. I mean, just to be able to understand jobs and everything else. I mean, that's, if that one guy leaves, you're in really pickle.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I do some of the administration myself as well. I've been trying to take on some of it. It's
We don't let Henry get on the machine and do any kind of administration.
I agree.
Okay. Well, so have you been anywhere else and worked in HPC where that wasn't the case, where you only had one? Because it would seem to me it'd be harder to get things done. Like it would slow down the whole process of onboarding a user.
Yeah, it really does slow down the process. And I've been faculty at the university, and we didn't have our own HPC system here until after I left, and we just pretty much used the same resources.
Wow. Because I think that whenever you get a user, to me, it's like, you need to strike while the iron's hot. And if you have a big, long lag,
You don't necessarily have here's many users as a double setting.
right.
So probably about 6 or 7 folks total
They're using it.
who use HPC for
So they all like the same domain? They're all using the same software, or are they using different?
most of them are using the same software.
That makes it easier.
Yeah, that does make it a little bit.
Yeah. Huh. You got to fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Some of the jokes that Sean was making, I guess part of it comes out of that split between, everybody is IT that's not faculty, even if you're research, facilitators, even if you've got a computer science background. And so, I guess the treating people like staff, some of what they would treat, a regular desktop support IT person bleeds over into the research people, I guess, too. I don't think I've experienced it that much, partially because I don't know I would notice. For 17 years, I had the word engineer in my title and not IT guy.
Right.
And
That makes
so-
it, when I hear that, it makes it seem to me it'd be harder for you to be able to do a great job without having focus on HPC, because it's a different beast than everything else.
Yeah, I won't say predominantly. I was hired to do HPC. They knew from the beginning that with our scale, it would not necessarily be a 40-hour-a-week, every week thing after it was set up. And so I'm doing other Linuxy things in the group in general.
Right.
Part of the reason I got that free time is because I probably desperately need to improve my onboarding.
Right.
I've got enough users now to where I need to get better training on the outset so that I don't answer the same questions repeatedly.
Right. And it helps, a web page with some examples, it helps, but it doesn't do everything.
I don't have a web page for here's how to use Linux. I have a web page for once you're on and once you know how to edit a file, here's an AMD script.
Right.
I tried that. My current users, and the web page ended up being 2 hours of absolutely wasted VI time. I point them to the web page. They come into my office and go, "But how do you do this?" And the example's right there, cut and paste. Oh, they come back 15 minutes later. Well, I cut and pasted, but it didn't work.
Mine thankfully don't walk across buildings to walk to my office. So I just get it over email.
Yeah, but they're in my office. one of the problems I ran into in a previous life was I had a stellar system administrator supporting my research group and our HPC efforts. My boss always saw him sitting in his office, tapping away, earbuds in, listening to music, and when he interviewed and got a better job offer, my boss wouldn't buy the theory of doing a counter offer. After all he did was sit in there. I never see him doing any work. And it was hard to explain to a guy who claimed to have HPC experience that if the system administrator wasn't running in circles and screaming with his hair on fire in the machine room, it meant everything was working, and he had kept it that. That's something that a lot of our leadership doesn't always grasp. It's like, you should be doing something 100% of the time.
Our users are really good about telling us when things aren't working right. I mean, I don't have to yell; they yell at him. So Henry.
Henry never did.
Yeah, he gets.
Hey, folks, do the following for us, please, for the folks who are out in TV land. Number one, if you're in the audience, shout real loud. I know you don't believe me, but I'm not kidding. And number two, Dave, when someone in the audience makes a comment or asks a question, repeat it back to them.
Okay.
Because they can hear you, but sometimes they can't hear the audience.
Will do.
If I could make a comment, I'm a one-man show, so I do user-facing, I do system-facing, I talk to the vendors, I talk to the faculty who want to buy stuff, I submit bug reports to the people who write the code that our researchers use. I debug code like C, Fortran, you name it, I've done it. So I guess what's my point? My point is that I try to shame people into, number one, looking at the wiki. I write an extensive wiki. Every piece of software I build, I write extensive compilation instructions, and then I delete everything, start from scratch, following my own instructions. So that's one. Number two, every issue report I get via email, I say, all right, here's the answer in the wiki, and then I explain what the solution is. Number three, I also say, well, this other person in your group has done a similar thing, go talk to them. It's really weird to me that grad students, even though they're in the same lab doing collaborative work in the same lab, like actually in the physical office, they don't talk to each other. Like, come on, guys, this is, this is the best part of your life, right? You're in grad school, you're around your friends, you're doing science, go talk to them.
Is that competitiveness, you think?
No.
Shame?
It's a combination of a lack of understanding. They're still a bit unfocused. They're overworked, at least in their mind, and they're trying to work on their little tidbit of it. Nobody else knows what they're doing. Just ask.
So Jerry says that they're overworked and overtasked. To kind of sum it up a little bit.
As far as they are concerned, they're overworked and they're task saturated, and nobody knows what they're doing except them.
Right.
Therefore, how could someone else help?
I can't help them as much as their peers because I don't know anything about their domain. And most of the time they use such specific language I can follow, but
I recognize
But they've
most of the
searched.
words, but not any of the
And
concepts.
there's no answer.
oh,
And
yeah.
so they come to you.
Most of the time when they come to me, they haven't searched because I usually do a Google search.
But they
It's
say
the
they've
first-
searched.
Yeah.
And they haven't found the answer. Therefore, either there is no answer or.
Right.
If I can interject, I think a lot of it is services like Google or Amazon or Starbucks. It's such the rest of the world has made things very easy for customers, right? They go up, I want my coffee 2 shots, half decaf, half not, low whip, blah blah blah, right? They customize everything and they expect it to be done like that. Or they go to Google saying, no, just give me a Google log. I don't care how you do it, blah, blah. And they don't really talk to their peers about how to get stuff done. And now they come to HPC and they have, it's just a computer, or it's just like a cloud service like Google. if I have trouble, I'll just ask the support staff and they'll help me out, like, for good customer service. But the reality is, like, things are different. Like, each research field is so different that they really should be talking to their peers in the same lab. Or not, I mean, they're grad students. I told the faculty, like, look, this is grad school. Like, it's part of the learning experience that they have to work a bit to do stuff that's not in their specific, like, they're biologists and they don't want to do HPC, but they have to do HPC because it's all applied computer science now, right?
Sometimes it's hard to tell exactly who all is in the same lab as well. That's one of the things that I run into.
Oh, I have, like, I set up groups for each PI, and the PI has to approve their accounts for HPC. So my account, user account system is completely divorced from the rest of campus.
Right.
It's a weird setup. We are run by the Office of Research. We have nothing to do with central IT. So I'm really a one-man show.
So one thing that Tufts does, and this is a slight step back a few minutes ago, regarding who users ask for help, is anytime we install a new piece of software, like most HPC sites, we have hundreds of pieces of software. We have a wiki page, and that wiki page has a standard format, including links to the email address, e-list, website, wiki, or whatever for that specific piece of software. And we've been experimenting with the last year on just pointing people to that page and saying, you want help with Top Hat. If we didn't have a domain-specific expert in bioinformatics, which we do, but if we didn't, here's the Top Hat site. Go to them, talk to them. So, we try to empower people to file their own bug reports and to communicate with the people that actually write the software. And this gives me an idea that maybe we should also start documenting research groups and putting that on our webpage and saying, oh, you're from Lab XYZ. Have you at least talked to the following other members of the lab who are documented on a wiki to find out if they're having any issues? So we're basically empowering them to find out who else is in the lab. So that's just a thought.
What I'm hearing is that most people, it's not a one-size-fits-all, or depending on how many people that you have to support and applications and how many staff, system-facing staff you have, kind of dictates about how you interface between researchers and system people and also the end user themselves.
So Tufts has recently started an experimental program, it's not even really official, where we are getting people out of our data center and the central IT group and having, like people from network engineering perhaps be the primary IT liaison with one of our, very important labs in order to help people at the data center understand, researchers' needs. Obviously, Henry and others have discussed that before, as well as researchers understanding that, all IT staff are not the same. So we may turn that into an official program, again, in order to help facilitate more interactions between researchers and other IT staff than just the people who are working on their printer. And that's not to mean the people working on the printer. That's very important too.
You guys have anything like that?
I mean, I'm basically the user-facing guy for anything that's on the HPC, right? We're pretty lightweight on the central IT staff. There is not a research computing arm anywhere in the university. I have been kind of that, or part of kind of that, in a research center previously, but they don't have that staff after I left and after a coworker retired. Right. And so, one statement to paraphrase is, we don't do research, which really means the people we've already got are pretty much completely tied up with what they're already doing.
Right.
I mean, I'm the closest one in there for HPC, but I don't support people's random instruments. I'm not a domain expert except in the things that I have already had to do for my own work. So I'm not the molecular dynamics person. I can read an error message. I can Google something, but why does this model not work is not my area.
I wish I had more domain expertise about, especially the bioinformatics. Henry talked about that the last panel, is that I'm not sure exactly why they all have different applications to do the exact same thing. It would be nice if we could standardize on that, but I don't even know how you'd have to get them in a room and have a symposium. Yeah.
So I agree with you, it would be nice, but there's literally no incentive for them to ever bother to do that. And we're not in a position to provide an incentive for them to bother to standardize. And their community does not have the same training that other communities have. And I think one of the things that we have to accept is most of the people, this is not specific to biosciences, most of the people who are developing research software for STEM research have little or no training in software development. So their practices are random.
At best, everybody else has just had a couple more decades to get it right.
Yeah, I think what's happened in the physical science and engineering community is because they started so early, they didn't have the luxury of having in memory 20 different codes running simultaneously. RAM was too expensive back then. So you had to have one code that did just about everything. Maybe a little bit of pre-processing, maybe a little bit of post-processing, but the bulk of the thing was a single code. I don't see going back to that because there's no incentive to learn how to write code that way. And if you're writing new code, you're going to write the simplest thing that you can figure out how to write because no one is paying you money to write it in the most effective way. And the rest of your community doesn't write software at all.
Right.
And so they're going to use whatever it is you create. That's not a value judgment. It makes sense that they're doing it that way. But I think that means that we have to adjust our practices to what they're going to do instead of hoping that they adjust their practices to what we already know how to do well. They're not going to.
No, you get your science.
To reinforce what Henry said, like the thing with biology, it's also complicated by the fact that they separate themselves based on the kinds of organisms they study, right? So people studying humans or people studying amoeba or people studying fruit flies, they have different journals, different papers, different peers. So, and that's how their code development spreads. I mean, they write for their own, desktop PC or whatever. So it's, I see that duplication, but it's not like they have Slack, a linear accelerator, HPC lab, high energy physics lab, writing one big code that everyone uses.
Sean or Scott, do you guys have anything to add that you want to put on top of this?
I had something brilliant about 20 seconds ago, and it just vaporized out of my brain.
You're off the hook then.
I think, I mean, a lot of the, as is often the case, I mean, when we get to a group of people together that sort of do the same things, we see a lot of the same problems. So I don't know that I necessarily have anything to add to the general discussion other than I commiserate.
That is true.
You know, I guess the thing I do have to add is what I keep hearing, and that's central to pretty much all of our discussions, is that cyber facilitators are essentially communicators that, are stuck in between any and every community that is going to use the facilities of a research center or an HPC cluster. And so I'm wondering what skills people need in order to build up, our communications ability. But in particular for this panel, what skills we might need to build up for interfacing with system staff. So you know, if we could talk about that, you know, what do you need to talk to system staff? What do they need from you? And is there a disconnect in there? Maybe I got off topic there, which is typical.
No, that's exactly what that was, you know, we're supposed to be about. As always the case, we end up going in 5 around the horn and everywhere else. So for me, there was 2 things. Number one was the bee in the bonnet users was, you know, how to handle those people a little bit better. And I say those people meaning, you know, I understand I've been there before. I get frustrated just like everyone else. I'm human. But I wanted to get feedback from especially the panel and people in the audience about, you know, what do you do when you have someone like that to, you know, disarm them or how to handle it at all. You know, everyone's got their own way. So I'd like to hear you guys about what you do whenever it comes to that. But usually it's a red letter day when I get one of those.
I've been threatened with arrest once, so I'm probably not the best.
Yes.
The best one to give any advice on that.
By a user?
Yes. Not in an HPC context, in the engineering context. And this is being recorded. That's as far as I'm going to go.
Okay. So did you walk away from the situation, or?
More or less, yes.
Yeah.
My boss backed me, and it didn't turn into anything. So
okay.
But that's how extreme that one user's response got.
Most of the time, it's usually on level, like from 1 to 10. When you get one of those, it's usually on level 4. And it's usually like a repeat offender. We used to have one guy who would do that all the time, that whenever he would email you, it'd be totally condescending. And luckily, I've got a boss that will step in at that point. So we used to, you know, grab the Henry stick, and Henry would go and admonish them privately about, you know, change your tone, you know, that sort of thing. But
yeah, we had a case with a particular user who was from a user community where that sort of behavior and tone was considered normal and acceptable. And so I'm not saying anything. And so we tried to convince the user that they needed to moderate how they express things. It wasn't what they were expressing, it was the way that they were expressing it. The user could not be convinced, and so I privately contacted the user and said, look, if you are both unwilling and unable to change how you're communicating with the team, then in future communicate only with me, and I will communicate with the team on your behalf.
Yeah.
And they agreed to that, and they ultimately decided, I think without talking to me, but to teach themselves how to moderate their tone. And so about a year later, I was able to let them go back to talking to the team directly, and they were able to moderate their tone for the team. But it was clearly very foreign to them to do that. I had another case where a user was genuinely mad at me, now not to the point of fisticuffs, but
Arrest, not assault.
okay. Very important distinction there, you can see. But I had to carefully explain to them that while they were welcome to tell me anything they wanted, I still expected them to address me in a civil way. And if they couldn't address me in a civil way, then they weren't going to be able to address me at all. And what surprised me about that, though in retrospect I think it makes sense, is their level of respect for me skyrocketed because I told them that. And so the lesson I learned is you don't escalate it, you don't even respond in kind, you stay very civil, but you insist that they do likewise, and most of them will. Of course, then later I was able to do something really nice for him, and now he thinks I'm wonderful. So even though he was super mad at me many years ago, now he thinks I'm swell.
I found that there are certain people out there who, and they tend to be absolute geniuses in their own discipline or their own area, who actually want to fight with you about something. They want to have a very passionate argument about something. They want to talk about it. It's not always that they're upset. It's just that's their way of dealing with this. That's their way of communicating with it. And if you can recognize that that's what's happening,
Right.
then you can start to work with that instead of getting upset yourself by it if you're realizing it that. I mean, there's a very prominent person in the networking community, a lot of people in this room know, that's very much like that. You realize that that's what this person is doing. You can have a great conversation, a great argument with that person, but realizing at the end of it that this person doesn't dislike you, you don't dislike them. They just want to hang out for a little bit on this particular deep dive topic that they're very passionate about.
And their way of expressing themselves and in some cases of processing their own emotions is by expressing it with a lot of passion.
Yeah.
Just a little quick comment. So we have 2 sysadmins. We're hiring another one, and as we're going through the job description, somebody made the comment, "What the hell are we looking for? A unicorn here?" So good for you guys.
It is hard sometimes, but yeah, you just got to be laid back. That's the way I found I'd do it anyway, is try to help them the best I can, and sometimes lean on the snooze button a little bit more, like, I'll get that in a minute. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if this should be part of the onboarding process. You know, everyone, at least to some degree, has some onboarding process, but I'm wondering if, there should be a one-page, 10-minute discussion when you're bringing people into the research facility on how to talk with staff or how to talk with each other. For example, when we, many years ago, went through a large-scale reorganization of our IT department, you know, we had a lot of outside people come in and facilitate that. And at the beginning of every discussion, of course, they always said, you know, be polite with each other, realize that everyone's human, that, as mentioned in chat, sometimes family issues, you know, are getting in the way. And of course, basically just to calm down. And after that was drilled into our head half a dozen times, it kind of almost took effect within the overall department. And of course, now that it's been a few years, we're probably stepping back. But I think maybe I will add something like that to our user onboarding and maybe offer some workshops for it.
Yeah, I think the thing that I'd like to see, if we're going to have an educational, you know, handout of how to interface with systems people, is more of, you know, when you ask for help, give your job output, your job script, or at least a location of where that is, things like that. Go ahead.
Along those same lines, talking about the kind of like the onboarding process. I've been with both the corporate enterprise as well as the post-secondary education, where they have brought in a company that does like a Briggs-Myers assessment workshop. It's like a 4 or 6 hour class where they bring everybody in and they teach the differences in their inherent personality traits,
right,
which do directly translate into how you communicate. Because it's amazing how you see 2 different people can look at a painting and see 2 completely different things.
Right.
And then you have to figure out ways to bridge that gap so that they're both communicating on the exact same thing.
Were they there to like help teach the person, you know, how to communicate?
It's an interpersonal communication
right.
workshop.
Okay.
I mean, the biggest thing I need is, kind of like what you said with the job output. Show me the minimum amount of information to show that you've got a problem compared to this other one where it works fine.
Right.
And part of that process, sometimes they'll figure out the problem themselves.
Yeah, that is true.
But one thing I always ask for is, I want to see the error message. Don't come in and tell me it's broke. Please send me the error message.
Right.
And you'd be surprised at the number of times I get, I never look at those. I don't pay any attention to them. I don't have it. It's already off my screen. Okay, when it comes up again, capture it and send it to me. Then I can help you.
Right. A screen capture is fine too. I don't have to have a cut and paste. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Even on your phone, I don't care, as long as I can read it. And,
yeah.
give you some help.
They don't know, they don't seem to, and yeah, I'm kind of like David. I've got a finite group, a smaller group than most of y'all are going to have of users. But you'd be amazed at how A, they don't talk to each other.
Right.
And ours is basically an ego block problem as much as anything. And B, how much they don't try and think through their own problem before they just run for help.
Does anyone use chat rooms with their users where they can all go on there, or groups of chat? You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
Slack. 'Cause,
does it help at all?
yeah, it does. It does.
Really?
Not having to talk to people face to face makes me happy. It's also really good. I mean, Slack has really good markup for terminal commands.
Right.
So it's a lot easier. I mean, you know, copy and paste these commands into an email that gets sent and filtered to HTML and text back to back many times, and then doesn't work very well. But Slack seems to work really well for us.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't have one of my own, but I leech off of I'll leech off of a computer science student Slack and a computer science student Discord. And people who know who I am, they bug me there,
Right.
you know, instead of emails, if it's something that really is real time.
Is everyone on the same one, or just the CS students? Like
It was set up by the CS, the Discord was definitely set up by the CS students.
Right.
I sometimes function as the ITS liaison there unofficially in terms of, no, that's not really what's going on. You know, yes, you're having a problem, but you know, it's being worked on. People know about it. Here's how widespread it is. No, it was student. That one was student startup, and the other one was from the computer science IT support guy, but it's still primarily me, him, and several of their students. But other than that, if they're not on that, yeah, they'll send me an email, and some of them show up in my office.
If you're looking for sort of free hosted chat and you want to connect with students, Discord is fantastic.
Yeah.
Discord's big in the gaming community.
Yeah.
If you want to be more professional and talk to faculty, then I would recommend Slack. Also, if you share ticket duty with someone else, have them do the email support, you do the Slack support,
Okay.
because the Slack users will always be more intelligent. There's a higher barrier of entry to get to that, and so they tend to be more savvy. So you can have your students and everyone else do the email, and you can do the fun stuff.
It's like going back in the chat transcript to, you know, kind of get information about what people have already been talking about, and it's almost like its own wiki where you don't have to post.
Well, the Slack markup that I use is very similar to the internal wiki that we use.
Yeah.
So when you help someone, you can use similar markup and then just copy and paste.
You guys have like different channels for different apps or groups?
I have different channels for different research groups.
Right.
Because when it was just one general channel, it became too noisy for other people to contribute.
Mhm.
And also Slack and Discord as well serves very good as sort of a historical search of what's happened.
Right.
And if they're targeted at the group, or even sometimes I'll do it at the application support level, then they can go back and see other users who had problems.
Right.
And by doing this and keeping them either group or more recently application or domain specific,
Yeah.
you become sort of autocatalytic in nature. That you educate the users and they educate other users. You supply the initial heat, and then they sort of help start supporting themselves.
Yeah. Kind of cuts down the signal to noise ratio of what you're actually looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anybody else?
I have a question to the sysadmins from a research facilitator point of view. A lot of the conversation so far has been about users directly messaging you, but as research facilitators, we kind of are like a gate between you and the users. So what are your pet peeves usually with research facilitators as such?
I don't have one, or I am the one. You know.
I've always been one.
Those who have research facilitators.
So I think it's a really good question, and I think you guys have actually started an important part of the conversation. I think in research computing, because you're so people-starved within the research computing organization, everybody ends up having to be researcher-facing to some extent. So for our group, and this varies year by year, you know, is it a new cluster deployment year that'll change the ratios, but we spend about 1.5 FTE genuinely system facing, somewhere between half and 1.5 FTE deploying user software in the science applications. And the remainder out of 5 FTE is working directly with users. That's in addition to, I think right now we're at 1.6 FTE of research computing facilitators who are not doing any system facing work at all. But what we've done is we put the whole organization into the support ticket system. Everybody sees all of that email traffic, because if somebody has something valuable to contribute, we don't want to have to guess whether they have something valuable to contribute, and we don't want to have to hunt them down. We just want them to respond when the user asks the question that they can contribute to. And I think that culture is a bit unusual. I think on the enterprise side, you tend to have larger teams, and therefore you have more specialization, including that a lot of the systems facing folks spend little of their time, or perhaps none, working directly with end users, especially if those end users are not administrative end users, right? If your end users are the financial people, you might spend some time working with them. But if your end users are grad students doing research, on the enterprise side, you probably never encounter them in person or on email.
Our new hires like that. It's that whenever he came over from enterprise and at OUIT, I said, you know, how many users do you have to deal with? He said, none. Okay.
Right, and in fact, I've often had conversations with folks from the enterprise side, and if I ask them that question, they can tell me they have extensive experience working with users, but their definition of users is other IT
people.
professionals.
Yeah.
And that's qualitatively very different.
Yeah.
As an example of somebody who might be system facing and never ever encounter a user, at one point, TAC down in Texas had no fewer than 6 people who were completely system facing, doing nothing but Luster. And the joke Jay Boisseau passed on at the time was they were not allowed to talk to the humans.
That's sad.
But TAC also has 40, 50 petabytes of Luster.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, I have a 1.2 petabyte file system. I'm pretty good with Luster, but if I were to hire someone to do it, that 1 petabyte of Luster would be enough. Luster's very high overhead. And if you're not using Luster now, don't start. Talk to me and we can talk about other things too.
At our shop, it was the parallel file system is a box with an 800 number on it.
DDN is direct networks? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a DDN problem.
Grr.
So in enterprise IT, there's something just like ownership of machines or tasks or services. And one of the problems that we sometimes see in the student facilitator, so that like it's happy or it's happy to come from the pipeline. So how do you separate between your sysadmins and your facilitators? Because sometimes somebody would get excited and they would jump on an HPC cluster and make some changes, and then it's find out and then like, okay, you fixed something for that one specific job or task what you're trying to do, but you missed the hub to cluster on the other end.
You take away their root privilege.
Exactly. Well, like, is that the only fix?
But I think too, you want to look at communication, because obviously there's communication right now. And you know, if you manage those people, I think.
Well, yeah, in that same vein, that could have gone a very different way had facilitator gotten a sanity check from some other person that eventually ended up catching it after it was all broken. That's not a guarantee it's going to happen. But I mean, I sanity check sometimes emails I'm about to send out. You know, that has no, you know, destruction, no electronic destruction to it at least. You know, trying to start an advisory group for policy changes. So, you know, it's not just me trying to come up with, you know, with solutions without some feedback.
I just ran into your exact problem. How many people here have installed Anaconda or Minicon? How many of you think the Anaconda is nothing but a snake? How many of you have a user who somehow acquired root privilege, and no, I didn't grant it, who fixed your Anaconda, your machine-wide Anaconda installation for you, and didn't tell you in response to a couple of requests?
Given a user free.
Sounds like you've got systemic dysfunction right there.
I will point out that he is above me in the hierarchy, but no, I did not give him root.
Anaconda can modify the local environment.
Yeah, it sounds like a file system permission.
No, he did, that wasn't what happened.
No, they probably updated the system-wide Anaconda install.
That's where backups are.
He no longer has root. His Anaconda installation is locked only to him and is read only for him to him. And the rest of the world now has one that's been checked with all of the other users. It only took me 2 weeks to make it all work. But that's the same sort of problem. It's a communication issue. He didn't think he needed, he's the Anaconda expert. A, he is.
Is he looking for a job?
B, just ask him, he'll remind you of it. But when you've got more than one user involved, that expert can be damaging the rest of your system and needs the sanity check. They need to talk to somebody else and see the pros and cons of doing it and just make sure they don't reach out and buy something. One other thought came up. We had a network administrator when I was in Texas that we reserved for specific problem cases. A, he was really, really bright in his field. B, he had the interpersonal skills for rattlesnake.
Oh boy.
In general terms, one of the folks who worked for him, his boss wouldn't allow him to go to the first meeting. So there were people who were detailed to go to the meetings, to communicate with the users, figure out what the problems were. Henry, you talked about gaining respect from a user who's just absolutely snarly. We saw that happen more than once. So they were sending out a team that would typically 2 of the network guys, network engineers, to go and try and defuse the situation, figure out what the problem was, and fix it. If that didn't work, if they got too nasty, they sent Matthew out with them on the second trip. If that didn't work, then they called the director of network services and said, you need to talk to this guy. Matthew couldn't even calm it down. But it was an escalating form of I actually thought it was mismanagement of communication, but it seemed to work most of the time. And how do you deal with the user and researcher side of it?
Right. We have a comment from TV Land. Also, system people often assume researchers should have the same understanding of systems. They wonder why application developers don't understand the system. We're here to help lower that expectation. As I said before, system people can't assume IT is the researcher's job. Once system people understand what kind of skill level they can expect from a particular researcher, they will change their language to make sure the researcher can understand.
I think that also raises, and I appreciate Lisa saying that, I think that also raises a really good issue right in the middle of that paragraph about the software developers, because I think particularly if you come from the enterprise side, you recognize that all software sucks, but you have specific expectations about the ways that it will suck.
Yeah.
And that will not include that it was developed by people who know nothing about software development. They may have very bad ideas about software development, but those bad ideas were developed through years of training. And when you encounter then,
an entire community where approximately nobody has any of that training,
Right.
the way that their software sucks is qualitatively very different from what an enterprise IT person would expect. And it's a whole new range of exciting possibilities. Like, yeah, I don't believe in indenting and I love GoTo. That's not something that a systems person would normally anticipate, but it's perfectly normal among researchers.
Right. I had a user group recently, an application. You know, Slurm has the option to do Java arrays, but most people turn them off with show queue.
Right.
I had economists who were seeding their random number generator by the Slurm job array ID environmental variable. And when I moved them to not using job arrays, to using like a high throughput batch system, so they submit one script for thousands of jobs, their code kept returning the same answer. Because they were doing MC, Markov chain, Monte Carlo based sampling. And the environmental variable wasn't set. So every single instance was starting at the same the chain starting at the same point. So as a software developer and a computational scientist, I would have never seeded my random number generator by an environmental variable, much less one that's queue dependent, queue system dependent.
Right.
Users are.
But it
Then
works.
it's a random number.
It worked right up until you change that thing.
Right.
Unfortunately, it really wasn't a random number, so.
Yeah.
From their perspective, it was.
It wasn't even a pseudo-random number.
Yeah, it was a very workable solution.
That's what I said. I said it was clever. To guarantee that each one had a different seed.
Right, and I mean, so in my experience, the fraction of users who have any understanding about how, and we should use the proper term, and none of us do either, because we just sort of assume this, pseudo random number generators, how they work, what makes a good one, and how they can pick the ones that produce good random numbers. Most researchers who use random number generation, in my experience, have absolutely no awareness that that's an issue.
You mean RAND and on Microsoft doesn't work well?
It would never occur to them, because after all, why would someone put that into the language if it worked bad?
Right.
I think that's a fair question, right?
It is a painfully fair question. And I prefer a hardware solution to that, something like the signal-to-noise ratio of 3 GPS receivers selected.
Yeah, but it's hopeless to try and teach that to hundreds of people running thousands of different codes.
Make it available on the system.
But the users don't write those codes.
Right. And it wouldn't call it.
Just tell them to use Mersine Twister from GSL.
They don't know what GSL is.
Tell them what GSL is. It's the GNU Scientific Library.
Right. I think there's an enormous amount of how on earth would they know about that. Some of you have heard me tell the story before. The first time I sat down with a researcher to work on some stuff with them, and they were explaining what their code did and how it was set up, and I said, "Oh, that's a binary tree." And this PhD chemical engineer said, "That's a what?" And I said, "A binary tree." And he said, "What's that?" And I was flabbergasted. How could someone not know? This was second semester freshman computer science. How could someone not know this? But over the years, I've come to understand, how on earth would they know that? Where would they ever have encountered that?
That was about to be my question.
That's the question.
Because
how on earth would
none
they
of
know?
my chemical engineering people would have ever
99%
seen
of the
that.
stuff that we're surprised they don't know, we should be surprised if it turns out they do know.
Never trust a major project to an oceanographer with 2 semesters of Fortran.
Well, if they have 2 semesters of Fortran, you're way ahead.
Fortran 66.
Doesn't matter.
Still run fast. They'll run faster than the Python, R, Julia, MATLAB code that you write. I'm happy with Fortran 4.
You're not old enough to be happy with 4.
And I missed the part where y'all said what percentage of users write code at all.
I think for us, it's certainly under 20. It's probably under 10. And I think that's standard. I think most
use pre-existing code.
Yeah.
Almost all of our users can download their code off somebody's website.
I'll put it this way: if they are engineers and not computer scientists, yeah, they're pretty much going to use an existing code.
I-
No, I do not know anybody that wrote their own molecular dynamics code.
I found this 8-year-old code on a discussion board on my Google search.
Absolutely.
You
I
please
mean,
run
sure,
this?
I'm not.
Yeah.
This solves my problem.
No,
That's what it feels like.
It's not a matter of
And the
we've
ones that
done.
do code are just copy and pasting.
Well,
Sure.
Yeah.
And you mean you don't?
I do all the time.
Our users, for the most part, do not write code. There's a small subset of them that do.
Okay, if the code already exists and it works, why write it?
It's even more than that. It's,
Because I've seen what code people write.
the following code exists that defines the collection of science problems that I can tackle. That's the way they approach science. And it's very understandable because they don't know anything at all about developing software.
Well, in their job,
And there's no reward structure.
And there's no reward structure. In fact, by default, there's a punishment structure. Because anytime they waste writing code of their own is time they are not graduating students, publishing papers, and writing grant proposals.
Well, and it's worse than that. You go write the epic code for modeling something, and you're going to get more complaints than you're going to get kudos for.
Sure.
In the long run. Let's say it goes out, it's accepted, it becomes the standard for your particular field. 90% of the email you're going to get is, I can't understand how to run this. Please take the next 40 hours of your day and make my code work, my implementation work. Or you screwed this up in line 714 of the third subroutine. Or your
Yeah,
library.
It's a, let's say, very high risk, very low reward thing to write your own software. So most people, I think very wisely, most researchers choose not to do it. But if they choose not to do it, that decides what research they can do.
One of the problems that I continually run into is that my researchers like to fix the community software.
That's great. As a community software developer, I would love to talk to them. I have tons
No,
of
you
software they can
wouldn't.
contribute
No,
to.
trust me, no, you wouldn't. Because the routine visit that I get on my software that I'm running today is, I made a few changes, but it should not affect how it compiles or runs.
Yeah.
And it goes downhill from there.
Right, and that's because they don't have the background, training, and experience. And the balancing act is always between being able to produce new kinds of science and the risks associated with code development. I think most of us have a lot of experience with. There's essentially infinitely many ways to do it wrong and vanishingly few ways to do it right. It is not a coincidence that they stumble on the wrong way.
You kind of have to be like a wizard and see the future of what your code's supposed to do in 5 years. And that's tough.
The fraction of people who have enough background and experience to be able to do that is very, very small. So we shouldn't be surprised that most of them are running somebody else's code because, okay, so you're never comparing it to what the ideal is. You're always comparing it to what the alternative is. The alternative to running somebody else's code is not running your own code. The alternative to running somebody else's code is not doing science.
I'm not.
Can I raise a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
Question for
Please.
any other PIs in the room. So in most sciences you have requirements, right? You join grad school or undergrad, you have a physics requirement, you have a chemistry requirement, you have a math requirement, but there's no CS requirement, right? Why is that? Like, I bring this up with the faculty I meet with once a month, and they are mostly in science. One guy's in CS. Like, so why don't you make your students take CS 101? It just gets them a flavor, and so they know, they won't know everything. They won't even probably learn how to program well, but they'll see how little they know. You know what I mean? If I talk about a for loop, a CS 101 will tell them what a for loop is.
Right.
But I don't see that change. I don't see CS 101 as being a requirement for any sciences at all, anywhere.
But But some of us have done that. My students hated it because if they didn't have two computer science classes, that was considered a leveling requirement to me. They had to have 2 computer science classes, and I had some statistics that they had to take. None of them regretted it 2 or 3 years down the road. All of them hated it in the first semester.
Right.
Some places are working on like a informatics type minor or certificate, but that's a sales job that you've got to get probably both to your computer science department and to the physical science or whatever the non-CS group is that whether that's bioinformatics, computational chemistry.
In my experience, these programs are better not run at computer science. There's a big difference between computer science and computational science.
Right.
And I'm faculty in computer science at UT Dallas. Before coming to UT Dallas, I was in computational science. And we've had much more experience doing these programs, maybe in partnership with computer science, but you don't let them drop.
Right.
Right? I mean, CS, especially, I mean, CS departments around the country vary drastically. Some of them are very academic focused. Like the top 5 CS departments, a lot of the students who come out of there can't program their way out of the back.
Right.
Right. But they're really good at being new CS professors.
Right.
So, you know, typically finding where the applications are written and seeing the program there with some research facilitators, I've seen more success in. Because I've started about half a dozen of sort of certificate or undergraduate double major type programs in computational science. And that's where we saw the most success.
So like Scott had a addition on there. Scott, did you want to say anything?
Right. So just to play devil's advocate just a little bit, and you know, this is the same thing that every department faces when we say everyone should have calculus and whatnot, and that who's going to teach those, you know, introductory courses every semester, and sort of as a follow up to that, my thought is that's why the popularity of certain things like drawing a complete blank, the carpentry, that's what I was trying to think of. Like, we try and do those once or twice a year to help bridge that gap.
That's a good point. All right, we have about 3 minutes left, so if anyone on the panel wants to have final closing remarks or bring up any points.
No.
Anybody here in the room?
Oh, I have a quick comment.
Okay.
I always have a comment.
Okay.
I think psychologically, it's interesting that most of the entire conversation leaned largely towards user-facing rather than systems-facing. Not the entire conversation, but a lot of it. And in a way, that's, you know, good and commendable because so much effort has been put into that in the last few years to make, you know, our facilities the excellent facilities they are. But at some point in time, yeah, we still need to remember how to talk with the sysadmin staff. So probably continue this conversation some more in the future.
Okay. I think it's kind of the nature of the beast of, you know, most of the time we want to talk about how users aren't doing things right, but sometimes we need to look at the other direction. All right. Well, thanks everybody for being on the panel, and we're going to break until 1:30. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.